Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to, I guess, an impromptu Taliesin Talks. Before anything though, I'd like to show you, if I may, my sad and regretful face. And the reason I'm showing you that face, Internet, is because this video was not meant to happen. I was supposed to talk about this subject that we're going to be talking about today on the weekly reset over the weekend, but as you may well know, there was no weekly reset over the weekend because we had no internet. We had no internet for the entire weekend. We couldn't make a weekly reset, so I wasn't able to talk to you about 8.2. I wasn't able to talk to you about the Crucible of Storms. I wasn't able to talk to you about all of the new models and mounts and amazing new things on the PTR, but most of all, I wasn't able to talk to you about the future, because hidden away amongst all that code, now the PTR is up and running and dragged out into the sunlight by people like Wowhead, is data-mined broadcast text pertaining to Azshara's Eternal Palace raid. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, you're not to trust data-mined broadcast text. That could change at any time. And you know, you're absolutely right. But it stays the same more often than it changes. And while it's there, oh, you better believe we're going to talk about it. And number two, but Taliesin, why are you so interested in Azshara's Eternal Palace, the raid of 8.2? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you. It's mostly because Ian Hazakostas has said flat out that by the end of that raid, we will know who the final boss of Battle for Azeroth is. It will be that obvious, and as you may well know, it's a subject that we've talked about in like plenty of videos, not least the who will we fight first, N'Zoth or the Lich King. It's a subject that we really like talking about and speculating about, and now with this data-mined broadcast text, we know word for word what happens in Azshara's Eternal Palace. We know how it ends, and we know the aftermath as well. And I would say that Ian Hazakostas was about 95% right. It's almost certain who that final boss is, but there's a really interesting either or situation that's set up for 8.3, and you better believe we're going to talk about that now as well. So first things first, we are obviously going to be diving into that data-mined broadcast text. We will be showing you everything that happens on Nazjatar and in the raid and in the aftermath. I will be performing it for your delight, and it goes without saying that obviously this is a red spoiler bot situation, guys. We're going to be ruining literally everything with this data mining that we have, and if you don't want it spoiled, then seriously don't be a dick. Go and watch something else. But for the rest of you who are staying for the fun, join us as we discuss Azshara's Eternal Palace, tell you everything that happens, how it ends, the aftermath, and the final boss of Battle for Azeroth, and what that will mean for the end of the game, okay? Go, 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 go. And we begin this delve into the narrative of 8.2 in Nazjatar, the other place you'll be spending your time in that patch. I'm sure you're very familiar with Mechagon. You probably heard us talk about it on the weekly reset. Maybe you've played it yourself on the PTR. That's the collecting island where the new dungeon is. Nazjatar, though, is where the main thrust of the storyline happens, be that the war campaign and, of course, the events leading up to the main expansion narrative that culminates in the raid, Azshara's Eternal Palace. Sylvanas, who has just come into possession of Naifu Waifu Xal'atath at the end of the Crucible of Storms raid that I'm sure you've just played through, for some reason is sending the Horde fleet out into the middle of the ocean near the Maelstrom. Who knows why? We don't know why yet. Maybe it's got something to do with Xal'atath, but either way, the Alliance are in hot pursuit, suspecting something is going on, and that is when the trap is sprung. Whether Sylvanas knows about it or not, the entire thing was a ploy to get the Horde and Alliance forces out into the open ocean where Queen Azshara, the ex-queen of the entire Elven Empire, the most powerful mage or arcanist in the history of Azeroth, opens up the ocean, Moses style, to reveal the city of Nazjatar below. The Alliance and Horde fleet crash down onto the island there, which has been revealed, and becomes stranded basically in this new zone with the curtain of ocean surrounding them the whole time. Which means, of course, don't forget that Azshara can kill them at any time. All she has to do is let the spell drop, and the ocean will come crashing back down, crushing and destroying the Horde and Alliance. And we very quickly realise the danger we're in and what we're going to have to do to survive. As Lor'themar and Thalyssra put it, Proudmoore and Shaw risked their lives to rescue Bane. Unexpected.
That animosity only benefits Azshara. Her power is considerable. Divided, we are no match for her, or the master she serves.
Cooperation between our sides has been the exception, not the rule. More often, we're at each other's throats.
Is it? Not long ago, Alliance and Horde fought together to liberate Suramar from the Legion.
Sylvanas has the loyalty of the people. So long as she is war chief, this war will rage within their hearts. We cannot stop it.
Perhaps we do not need to. It might be enough to direct our attacks against Azshara rather than the Alliance.
That plan would infuriate Blightcaller, which makes me like it all the more. It stops when you turn from one another and walk away.
Yes, we also have a history of setting differences aside to fight greater foes.
A lesson once taught to Jaina Proudmoore and me. Your counsel is wise, Thalyssra. Our focus must be on ending Azshara's reign.
A truce, then. We fight Azshara here, not one another.
But if the Alliance undermines our efforts, the flames of war will rise again. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, this is meant to be a faction war expansion. It's all about Horde versus the Alliance, faction against faction, big purple evil lady versus angel-faced crying boy. There can't be a truce between Horde and Alliance. That would be ridiculous. What about the faction war? And you're quite right and everything. You are right, but no, here we are, two leaders of the Horde openly talking about allying with the Alliance. And on the Alliance side, a very similar conversation happening with Jaina and Genn and Shandris Feathermoon. Realising that the danger they're in is so great, they have no option but to band together and defeat Azshara through the power of friendship. And their Heart of Azeroth necklaces, full as they are, bursting to the brim of magnificent Azerite power. That might be important later on. So yeah, I know, in a massive surprise to literally everyone, we've realised that there's a big world-ending threat on the horizon and that we're going to have to team up together to beat it. Very strange, very weird. It makes me think, though, that Sylvanas and Anduin are not on Nazjatar. They are where they spent most of the expansions, sitting on their thrones in their various faction capitals, and it's the other guys that are doing all the lead work, because if Sylvanas was there, clearly this conversation would not be going down. But this is what is decided. Horde and Alliance are now working together on Nazjatar, and this eventually culminates in the breaching of Azshara's Eternal Palace and the raid of 8.2. And if Ian Hazzikostas is to be believed, I have no reason to doubt him, the raid will open just 2 or 3 weeks after 8.2 goes live. So there's not like months of story here before the raid opens like in 7.2. This is happening incredibly quickly. Actually, there is loads of really good stuff as you're exploring Nazjatar involving Thalyssra, because of course she's from Suramar, she's a Nightborn elf. She actually remembers Zin Azshari, the Night Elf capital that now lays in ruins in part of this zone. She tells us that she went there as a child. She literally remembers this great civilization of 10,000 years ago, and she has loads of great interactions with Azshara as we're exploring round. Azshara, who still hasn't decided to kill us yet. It's all very strange. And just to address this, because I can already hear in my head the comments down below going, oh, what? Jaina seeking peace with the Horde? That is so out of character for the Horde hating Jaina. And I'd imagine it's only Horde players thinking that, because Jaina, of course, before she was the big bad Horde hater, was always a peace broker, trying to find ways to fix the relationship between the Horde and Alliance. Bestest buds with Thrall. It was only the events of Theramore and Garrosh that changed her and turned her against that. And as Alliance players will know, pretty much all of the storyline of 8.0 and 8.1 has been focused on Jaina finding peace with all of that and coming to terms with it. So she's a lot more chill and a lot more, in many respects, like the Jaina she was before Theramore happened. Basically, it makes perfect sense that she would be at least open to finding common ground with the Horde, particularly if all of their lives were at risk here in Nazjatar. But like I say, this reasonably short and sweet storyline culminates in week 2 or 3, according to Ian, with the attack on Azshara's Eternal Palace. A palace that proves remarkably easy to gain access to. And all the way through our encounters in this raid, there are hints in voice lines from the various bosses that we fight that us being there may just be part of some grander plan. I'm not going to address every single boss in turn, but it starts getting very interesting when we face off against Priscilla Ashvane, who is a boss in this raid, although she's looking quite different. And at the end of that encounter, when she's defeated, she says, "Puppets, fools, the Banshee baited you to your own slaughter, gave Azshara what she wanted. N'Zoth will rise, his madness comes." Which really does seem to lay that theory out in black and white, doesn't it? I mean, she literally says, you have been tricked, you've been led to your own slaughter. She could feasibly be talking about the trick that brought the ships crashing down onto Nazjatar in the first place, but she goes further. You gave Azshara what she wanted. N'Zoth will rise, his madness comes. Now, we've always known that Azshara was in the service of N'Zoth. We know that he turned her and her people into Naga, with her as their queen. We know that ostensibly she is working to bring about his rebirth and return to Azeroth, but we weren't sure. We've speculated in our videos that actually they're working against each other. That wouldn't seem to be the case, judging by this speech here. And then one of our party, and remember it's Alliance and Horde going through this raid together here, says, "Ashvane spoke with a serpent's tongue, but could she be right? Were we lured to Nazjatar as part of some dark bargain?" I think dark bargain might be the correct term. I think you might be onto something there. And things become even more ominous when we come up against the penultimate boss of the raid, the Herald of N'Zoth. Now, he looks really weird and pixelated above my head here, and that's because on the Dungeon Journal in the PTR at the moment, his model is like astoundingly small, like really tiny on that page. I'm assuming that in the real raid, he's going to be like a big, massive, scary thing, but we don't know that for certain. It could turn out to be that he is in fact just a tiny little mouse boss running around all tiny. Maybe that's the challenge of the fight, is just, you know, finding him. That's just speculation. And he says, "The tide rises, the breaker of chains comes, your eyes open, closer, closer, all paths open, all truths revealed, our fates are one, your heart, your offering, all dreams made real, such a heavy burden you carry, soon you will be free of it, your crimes are terrible, numberless, glorious." And the most interesting thing about that text is not even the reference to the puzzle box of Yogg-Saron, which refers to Ny'alotha as a city of terrible, unnumbered crimes. No, the most interesting bit is this. Your heart, your offering, such a heavy burden you carry, soon you will be free of it. I can't be the only one who's thinking at this point that he might be referring to the heart of Azeroth. And I can't help but clock the insinuation that we will soon be free of the burden of the heart of Azeroth. But the real most interesting thing that the Herald of N'Zoth has to say is after the fight has ended and he's supposedly dead and we're getting ready to have the final battle against Azshara, because it looks like there's going to be a little cutscene or something. Thalyssra says, "There is a presence here, tendrils strangling my mind." And then the Herald of N'Zoth comes back and says, "The locks weaken, the world screams, N'Zoth rises once more." Which is, you know, bad news, isn't it? And it seems like that we as a group are having some kind of vision. Shandris Feathermoon says, "Out there, titan pillars and chains descending into the darkness." And Thalyssra says, "Azshara wants us to see this. Why? Surely she knows we would never let that monster free." Oh no, we would never let that monster free. And those chains that they're talking about have to be those glowing white titan chains that we see behind Azshara in that tiny little tantalizing little film that we got shown on the 8.2 reveal stream. That looks to be the final boss room of this raid, or at least part of it. And those chains seem to be holding something, don't they? Something in place. And then the vision ends and Azshara says, "Come, heroes, prove yourselves worthy. Find me in the Circle of Stars, which is another direct reference to the Il'gynoth whisper, to find him, drown yourself in the Circle of Stars. It's a line that has prompted hours of conjecture and speculation from every WoW creator, including us. Now we know what it means. The Circle of Stars, for some reason it has this name, is literally the final boss room, and even the bit drown yourself is very pertinent here, because I have reason to believe that the final boss room of this raid isn't actually situated in Azshara's Eternal Palace, but much like the Tomb of Sargeras, where the entire thing happens in the tomb and then there's a portal right at the very end that takes you to Jaden's disco ship where you have the final fight, I've got a feeling a similar thing is happening here, and I'll explain why later on. But whether we're still in the actual physical palace or not, it seems that we chase after Azshara, and I imagine there's some sort of big trash fight or something, which obviously we come out of victorious, because then Azshara says, "You caught me off guard. Fair enough, but you are as trapped here as I. This need not be the end for any of us." And then Thalyssra says, "Stars, save us! Azshara is drawing upon the heart of Azeroth, feeding its energies into her ritual. And she's got us trapped. There's no way of teleporting out." And she says, such a delicious irony, the Diamond King has been made a pawn, which is, again, is one of those Il'gynoth whispers explained. The Diamond King was, in fact, Magni, and he has been made a pawn because all throughout the expansion, he has been telling us to fill those necklaces, those Heart of Azeroth, with the lifeblood, the very power, the essence of the sleeping titan, Azeroth. And we did what he said. We went out there, we did world quests, we did island expeditions for shit's sake. We filled that necklace all the way up to level 50 if you've been doing your progress properly, and level 46 if you're me. But either way, that's a lot of Azerite power, okay? And it turns out that was all part of the plan. As Azshara puts it,
"You see the truth now, don't you, heroes? Every move you've made has been according to my will. That lumbering dwarf believed you could save Azeroth by empowering your shiny little heart, the gift of a sleeping titan. Yes, a titan's heart was exactly what was needed, not to heal the world, but to shatter the prison of a god. The ritual nears completion. The Black Empire rises, and the world awaits its true queen."
Everything that has happened in 8.2 and probably before has been about getting us to Nazjatar with those big old Azerite batteries that we wear around our necks, conveniently charged by us. Everything we did in 8.0 and 8.1 and 8.2 leading up to this point, just because we wanted to unlock some rings on our Azerite armor, we are now taking the power that she needs for her ritual to release the old god. Because those chains behind her going down into the darkness, those are Titan chains. Those chains are older than us. Those chains are older than Queen Azshara. Those chains are older than the entire Night Elf Empire. They're older than the trolls, the first sentient race to walk on the face of Azeroth. They're older than the elemental wars. They stretch right back to the very end of the Black Empire, when the Titans discovered Azeroth and discovered the old gods laying waste to it. And in an effort to stop the corruption of the world soul, they imprisoned the old gods where they were. These chains have been in place since then, because these chains are constraining N'Zoth. The final old god is here, in chains, a prisoner where he's been for countless millennia, and we've just bought his left-hand woman all of the power she needs to release him. So this final fight with Azshara is really interesting, because what she's doing is she says, "I will hold the waters at bay so long as I remained entertained." She's swimming around, and we're in like an air bubble here, and she wants us to survive, but she also wants to draw that power out of us. So we have to attack her to stop her from destroying the things holding that bubble in place, so the water doesn't doesn't come and crush us and drown us in the circle of stars. You see, it's very, very clever. So to stop her doing that, we have to attack her with all our power, which is of course augmented through all of that Azerite armor and through the new Heart of Azeroth traits that we'll be using as well. We are channeling that power, that Azeroth energy to her, which she is using to finally, after 10,000 years of trying, break the chains that are holding N'Zoth in place, just like she promised to do. And of course, because we are badass Azerothian heroes, we do that. We defeat her. It's unclear whether she is killed or survives and runs away, or if N'Zoth kills her as he's released to sort of gain energy. We don't know, but that's when we take the opportunity to escape from wherever we are. And I say wherever we are because I'd like to go back, if I may, to what I said earlier about not being entirely certain that we are actually in Azshara's Eternal Palace at this stage. And I'll show you why. It's because wherever we are is where N'Zoth is. And if we take a look at this image from Chronicle Volume 1, don't tell Pyromancer we're doing this, he'll get very angry with us for taking this seriously, but here we can see the unsundered, ordered Azeroth, and it very handily shows us where N'Zoth is on the map. There he is, that's his actual position, just to the southwest of the Well of Eternity. The Well of Eternity, of course, the open wound full of the actual lifeblood of the planet, which is where Zin Azshari, the huge capital, which we explore the ruins of on Nazjatar in 8.2, is situated. Okay, so here is Nazjatar. As you can see, the ruins of Zin Azshari are situated in the far east of that zone, which would place Nazjatar, the zone, right there to the west of the Well of Eternity, which is now, of course, the Maelstrom. Because since the Sundering, the map of Azeroth doesn't look like this. But here's an important thing. N'Zoth was imprisoned where he was. So there is Nazjatar, and there is N'Zoth. They're not in the same place at all. And if I superimpose the current map of Azeroth over this image, but keep those red circles where they are, as you can see, the Maelstrom is in exactly the same place. That's where we'll find Nazjatar, and N'Zoth would appear to be situated rather conveniently, you might think, between Zandalar and Kultiras. And I mean exactly in between the two islands where we've spent most of our time in battle for Azeroth. If N'Zoth was imprisoned where he was, which he was, and the chains would suggest that he hasn't moved since then it stands to reason that where he was in the middle of a Black Empire city, his own Black Empire city, which would mean that the ruins, or whatever's left of that city, are still there. Maybe that city was called Ny'alotha, but either way, it would appear that that city is right between Kultiras and Zandalar. And if I was a game developer, and if I wanted to have an 8.3 which was set around a Black Empire city, maybe or maybe not called Ny'alotha, I would think the equidistance between Zandalar and Kultiras would probably be quite a convenient place to put it. Which is why I think we travel through a portal or something to actually get to that final fight, because that final fight is where N'Zoth is. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's also where 8.3 turns out to be as well. Because make no mistake, by the end of that final battle with Azshara, N'Zoth is free from his Titan bonds. That's made incredibly explicit in Datamined broadcast text from the aftermath, after we've escaped that arena at the end of the fight, presumably because N'Zoth is free and is just totally about to kill us, between Lor'themar and Jaina.
Our victory rings hollow. Azshara's master will rise. Nothing can stop that now.
For all her lies, Priscilla Ashvane spoke one truth. The war between the Alliance and Horde has kept us distracted. Divided, we have no hope against N'Zoth.
We may have found common cause here in Nazjatar, but the battle still rages beyond these waters. So long as Sylvanas holds Orgrimmar, there can be no lasting peace.
The war needs to end, Lor'themar. You know this to be true.
I had hoped that reason would prevail, but the time has come to finish this. I will tell my people what transpired here, of how Azshara fell because we stood together, of the threat rising from the depths, and all that is at stake if we should fail. Then I will take my place beside Saurfang and Thrall and pray that the Sin'dorei stand with me.
And this dialogue is very interesting, partly because it does just hammer home that N'Zoth is free and he will rise, and that's what we're going to be doing in 8.3, but also because of something else that it tells us too. Because if Azshara and Nazjatar is a threat dangerous enough to risk teaming together and risk the wrath of their leaders, Anduin, and in particular you'd think Sylvanas, if Azshara is a big enough threat to do that, then N'Zoth, a risen old god, most definitely is. Jaina explicitly says, divided, we have no hope against N'Zoth. The war needs to end. And Lor'themar says, so long as Sylvanas holds Orgrimmar, there can be no lasting peace. I will take my place beside Saurfang and Thrall and pray that the Sin'dorei come with me. So Lor'themar is flat out conspiring to treason here. He's saying he's going to join the rebellion of Saurfang and Thrall, and he is going to rise up against Sylvanas. Not because she loves genocide, not because she burns trees, not because she's in thrall of an old god dagger called Xal'atath, because she won't allow the truce between Alliance and Horde that is needed to defeat this old god threat. And you can't blame her, because honestly, who would have predicted that the final boss of the expansion was going to be N'Zoth and that Alliance and Horde were going to have to work together to defeat him? I can't think of anyone predicted that. No one predicted that. That came out of left field. And not only that, but it would seem that everyone that predicted that Sylvanas was going to be Garrosh 2.0 got it right as well, because here is Lor'themar planning a rebellion with old school Hordes to throw her down, whether that be through diplomacy or force. And you'd imagine it's probably going to be force. But whoa, hold up there, Sailor, because do you remember I said there was a really interesting either or situation going on here? Well, this is it, because maybe 8.3 won't be Black Empire City, which may or may not be called Ny'alotha, with N'Zoth at the heart of it as the final boss. Maybe we won't be dealing with N'Zoth until next expansion, 9.0, and I'll get the Black Empire whole expansion that I've always wanted. Maybe that's all on hold for now, and in fact, the rest of this expansion is tying up this loose end, the Sylvanas loose end. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, all that could mean is even more of a Garrosh 2.0. It means that the final raid of this expansion would be an attack on Orgrimmar to overthrow Sylvanas. This is terrible. This is the worst expansion ever. And I can see why you're thinking that. I do. But let me present to you another possibility. Because don't forget, everything that we've just been through in this video, all of that Nazjatar stuff, all of the story going through that raid, all of that happens, if Ian is to be believed, in the first 2 or 3 weeks of 8.2. All of that story is out there by week 4. Everyone's seen it. It's canon at that point. There's a lot of patch left after that. What if patch 8.25 is a big story patch? A patch which is, as I predicted a while ago, a much bigger patch than we're expecting. Focused as it is around Saurfang and Thrall and Bane and Lor'themar and them putting together their rebellion with the Alliance's help, so they're all in it together. And what if the war campaign gives us quests doing that and then all heading to Orgrimmar to tell Sylvanas that there needs to be peace so we can fight the old gods? But what if Sylvanas isn't there? What if Sylvanas has gone missing? What if, instead of 8.25 being some kind of fight or overthrow with the Banshee Queen, what if instead it turns into a search for her, which takes us all over Azeroth, finding clues of where she might be, a search which is ultimately fruitless, and we don't find her. Sylvanas has literally disappeared off the map with Nathanos in tow, of course. That creates a very interesting situation, because now there is a power vacuum at the top of the Horde. A power vacuum that someone like, say, Thrall, someone respected by every other Horde member, might be able to step in and put right. If Thrall says, look guys, I'm not being funny, but there's an old god in between Kul Tiras and Zandalar, in the middle of an old god risen city, which may or may not be called Ny'alotha, together. We need to band together to fight him. Sylvanas isn't here. We need an acting war chief. And I think Bane is your man. What if Bane becomes acting war chief in a bloodless revolution? They haven't overthrown Sylvanas. She's just not there. That gives them the freedom they need to team up with the Alliance, and then we have 8.3, the Black Empire City, a patch which sees us negotiating the twisted old god architecture of the Black Empire and braving the maddening whispers of the old god that bombard us the whole time, culminating in that predicted final battle against N'Zoth, a battle which is a lot harder than we expected. And what if N'Zoth is on the verge of victory, destroying the Horde and Alliance for good and leaving the planet at his mercy? What if that is the moment that Sylvanas returns, not just with Xal'atath, Naifu Waifu in tow, but also the Lich King? Because all of this makes me think, you know, that it's quite likely that I won't be getting the Black Empire expansion in 9.0 that I want so bad. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but if I had to bet money on the title of the next expansion, I would put genuine hard cash on there being the words Lich Queen in that title. What if, aware of the danger that the risen N'Zoth would cause and doubting the Alliance and Horde's ability to counter it correctly in this scenario, she goes off to create her own alliance with the powers of death and the Lich King? What if she arrives there with Bolvar, the Lich King, and the Scourge army in tow and give us the final strength we need to defeat N'Zoth and snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat? And what if, during that fight, Bolvar is killed or sacrifices himself to get that victory? We need a new Lich King. And what if Sylvanas, seeing how she has no place in the Horde anymore and how they won't protect her against the justice and the retribution that the Alliance is seeking against her, what if she decides she has nothing to lose in taking up that helm and placing it on her own head? What a setup for the next expansion would that be? So what do you think, guys? Now you know, word for word, what happens in the Shara's Eternal Palace raid and in its aftermath. What do you think is in store for 8.3? Who do you think is the final boss of the expansion, Battle for Azeroth? And what do you think is going to happen to Sylvanas? This is something that I would genuinely love to know, so let us know in the comments below. Personally, I'm in two minds about it. It looks more and more that 8.3 and maybe even 8.4, if they want to make it super big, is going to be N'Zoth and the sunken city which was his prison for all those countless millennia. The city which I still think may or may not be called Ny'alotha, and a risen old god Black Empire city, even just for a patch, would be so awesome. I'm salivating even thinking about it. I would love like that whole Rise of the Black Empire expansion, where in my head, where, you know, cost and development isn't an issue, you know, the whole of Azeroth is kind of consumed by all of the old gods coming back to life, and it's kind of like a cataclysmic event, and the entire expansion is us trying to survive in these risen Black Empire cities all over the globe. That's what I want. That's what I want. But it certainly looks like 8.3 and the final boss of this expansion is going to be N'Zoth. But there is that thing about Sylvanas as well. Do you think it's going to be like a full-on just Siege of Orgrimmar Garrosh 2.0? I kind of feel like Blizzard just wouldn't repeat that. Surely there has to be more to it than that, which is why I came up with my counter theory, my other speculation. What do you think of that? Do you think we could see her just disappear and then come back at the end of the expansion with the Lich King in tow? And could that finish with her becoming the Lich Queen? I don't know. I just want to hear what you think. But thank you for joining us today. Part of me is really sad that we couldn't discuss this in the weekly reset, all scripted and nice, but part of me is also glad that we have this video to discuss it all by itself. So maybe in the long run, a happy accident. I'm going to go and work on the Taliesin talks that were supposed to come out this week, entitled something like What Happens When Azeroth is Born and Whose Side Is She On? So, you know, another one to look forward to there. Maybe we'll get it done before we go to Japan. Who knows? But either way, there will be a weekly reset at the weekend before we go away on our honeymoon. So look forward to that. If you like this video, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make our videos happen. If it wasn't for you guys, seriously, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin Evitel. So thank you. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Alex Afrasiabi. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.